Please welcome to the stage Morgan Ortegas of Mare Liberum and our esteemed panel.
Okay, we're going to jump right into it. Good afternoon, Miami. Come on, Miami. Yeah, that's what I thought. Well, we have an amazing panel. I'm not going to introduce everybody. First of all, everyone already knows who they are anyway. But I see my role as a moderator to get debate and discussion going. We're talking about something incredibly important today, which is the rule of law in Latin America, how we balance national security priorities with human rights priorities. And we have literally the region's leading experts to talk about these issues. To kick it right off, to get going, because we have an hour and we're going to make the most of this hour, especially with all of these world-renowned leaders, I'm going to start with the gentleman to my left who needs absolutely no introduction, Senior Senator from South Carolina, Senator Lindsey Graham.
Thank y'all. You want me to do this in Spanish? It'd be like the shortest speech in history. So thanks for having me. Where's the President of the University? How about a round of applause for this guy? Good luck in football, sort of. Yeah, I've been here for an hour. Nobody's beat me up or anything, so this is good. So I want to compliment the university for hosting. Thank you, Morgan. Thank you, everybody at Concordia. Thank you, Ileana. So rule of law and security. All I can say is you can go too far in trying to suppress people. You'll have more problems than you started with. If you're not tough, they'll run you over. So, and if you don't have a rule of law, nobody's going to like invest in your economy because if a country can make up a tax that doesn't exist and shake you down, nobody's going there. So it's the foundation, really, of everything that makes society worth living in. Without the rule of law, you get your own militia. Why is the Mideast so screwed up? Nobody trusts the government. Nobody trusts the cops. It's probably true in other parts of the world. But what I want to say here is that I spend a lot of time in the Mideast for a reason, because that's where everybody's blowing each other up all the time. I don't spend enough time in our backyard. And when I mention Central and South America, Latin America, nobody gets overly excited one way or the other. They think about problems with immigration. You know, it's an opportunity, and I'm going to correct that. I'm going to start spending more time in our neighborhood. Senator Bennett and Cassidy have a bill that would open up investment and really kind of a 30,000-foot approach to how to change American law to more interact with people in Central and South America and the Caribbean and everywhere else to make it easier to do business. But I would just say on the security front that what's going on over there is coming here. The immigration problem is due to the magnets we've created. So I want to apologize to everybody to the South that the problems you're having, I think, are directly related at the level we're talking about to a decision we've made as a country to make people believe if you get here, you never leave. And they're going through your countries to get here. And they're upsetting everything along the way. I can understand why everybody in the world want to come to America, but we can't let everybody in the world come to America. We have got to have order out of chaos. And until we change the narrative that if you get 1 foot in America, you're probably never going to leave, we'll never have control over this problem. And until we get control over this problem, your countries are going to have a level of instability that makes everything else almost impossible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. I want to go. Oh, Okay, now you can hear me. I want to go directly to somebody who has been affected the most, probably, in many ways at this table, by the deterioration of the rule of law. And that's, of course, Juan Guaido, the former legitimate president of the National Assembly, of course, of Venezuela, someone who I had a huge privilege to meet when he was on the front lines fighting for his country, for freedom, with Secretary Mike Pompeo. And you are just such a bright and shining star. You give, still all these years later, you give so many of us inspiration and hope. We know that you, of course, participated in Operation Freedom, the uprising against the Maduro regime, which regrettably did not prevail. Do you think that there is any hope, and I'm sure you do have some hope for us, for how we can return economic prosperity to Venezuela and how we can also return true democracy and freedom for the Venezuelan people?
Gracias, Morgan. Voy a hacerlo en español. Además, estamos en Miami. A ver, el senador Graham acaba de hablar de algo central, rule of law, el Estado de Derecho. El deterioro de la democracia en Venezuela vino directamente ligado a la toma de las instituciones, del acabar el sistema de justicia, la economía, evidentemente, que impactó precisamente en la migración, la persecución.
And this led to persecution and therefore migration, which is a central element of the rule of law. Impunity. This is what prevails, and it is closely related also when you get a deterioration of the rule of law, you get poverty, and it promotes, and then it leads to migration, and this promotes disorder in the region. And I say that because there is impunity to the behavior of this type of regime. We don't have rule of law in Venezuela, we don't have rule of law in Nicaragua and in Cuba, but you know what is worse, to allow these regimes to continue acting like this with impunity, thus deteriorating ultimately democracy. When Nicolas Maduro sees that Daniel Ortega puts in prisons 7 dissidents, pre-candidates, the incentive he has is that to detain the presidential candidates. And the same thing as you have seen in Belarus, Russia, and, well, everything that we have seen with the propaganda of China. Because this propaganda is not only related to what we have heard about cultural appropriation, which threatens the idea of democracy and is based specifically in the permissivity with which a dictatorship freely associates with organized crime. For example, what happens in Venezuela with gold, or the dissident groups from FARC or Hamas acting in Venezuelan territory. This is basically related to the incentives we see for this type of regimes, because it's 17 years in which no pro-democracy movement in the world has managed to recover democracy. We have today a candidate, despite all the risks and threats that is threatening the life, this regime of everyone. Like, for example, today, when 1 year have been forced to flee from my country, together with Fabiana, who with our 2 daughters crossed the river with many obstacles to be able to be here, to have the opportunities to recover the rule of law in our country, and to see if we can get the means to put a halt to this type of regimes that have that are threatening the region, that are creating instability in the region. The sanctions in Venezuela are not what are causing the migration. It's the lack of rule of law, the lack of living conditions and dignity in Venezuela. And we do expect more to see if we prevent this lack of impunity. Because if Maduro signs an agreement like the one he signed with or before or with the witness of the United States, and he does not comply with he agreed to, well, he's been motivated to continue creating this organization. The positive that I can mention today is that today we have an alternative that has been unified, despite there is no rule of law threatening the life of the candidate or the leader, María Corina Machado. Well, or even, you see, they just, if you remember the case of the Chilean lieutenant that was murdered in Chile, and allegedly there is the participation of Miraflores, the government or the regime in this case. So it's not only threatening the integrity of those in the country, but those outside like me who sit here defending the fundamental rule of law and democracy.
Thank you so much. We are going to get to everybody on this stage. I want to bring in some important women's voices on the stage, especially to my right, Dr. Rebecca Chavez. You just finished being Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Western Hemisphere Affairs. Incredibly important position in the Pentagon. I know you were working on some of the very issues that Juan Guaido was just talking about. Can you give us your thoughts of how the United States and Latin American countries can greater increase their defense ties as we work on issues together like the rule of law and national security?
There we go. Thank you, Morgan, and thank you for your comments about Venezuela and about the importance of the rule of law. I would say that one of the most important things that the U.S. could do right now is related to your point about we have these 3 full-blown dictatorships in the region, but there's also many other countries where we're seeing the kind of these presidents elected to power and then once in power deliberately dismantling democratic institutions. And I think we need to have a response to this. We need to have some sort of early warning system because it's no longer in the past, it was the threat of a military coup where it happened almost overnight. And as far as the rule of law goes, I would say one of the most troubling manifestations of this is, well, we see steps like trampling on freedom of expression, but the deliberate dismantling of autonomous judiciaries that should be serving as a check on the power of the president. And the last thing I'll say about this, it's important to note that these sort of, I wouldn't even say democratic backsliding because I think it's more a deterioration of democracy because not all countries in the region started at the same point as far as how consolidated their democracies really were. So I think that it's important to note that this is coming from both the left and the right in the region. So it's not just, I mean, we see it in Mexico very clearly, but we also see it in countries like El Salvador, where Bukele ran for government, it was elected president by a majority, even though it's against the Constitution. And I would say it's also important to note that he is wildly popular and his security policies are clear violations of democracy, the rule of law, really basic human rights. But people are willing to support authoritarian leaders if they feel that democracy is not delivering on their basic needs. And one of those basic needs is security, the ability to send your kids to school safely. So I think it's on us, and one of the things that we can do as a community is come up with alternatives for combating insecurity that are within a rule of law framework.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. I have to bring in the Grand Dame of Miami and the Grand Dame of Latin America, of course, Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen. You know, it's interesting what she was talking about. We have these discussions about democracy versus autocracy around the world. And I think One of the things that I want your opinion may have been a big change since you left Congress is the influence of the Chinese Communist Party in Latin America, and what I would judge to be very nefarious ways. Can you speak a little bit more about the Chinese Communist Party presence, and is it affecting democracy and rule of law, especially with what Dr. Chavez just spoke on?
Well, Dr. Chavez was right about this this problem with autocracy and the strong arm, and it is troublesome. But Carlos Jimenez is really the person who can better answer this question, because he is on that committee where it's very important. This select committee on China, Morgan, and as Lindsey knows, is not just on China, it's on the Chinese Communist Party. And we see the influence of China and Russia, nefarious actors throughout Latin America. There is very little exception where you could say, well, no, they have not touched there. Russia's influence in Nicaragua is astounding. And China sees an opening in Latin America, and you can see them getting their nose in the tent, and it's not going to go our way. And I'm gonna cede my time to Carlos, because he knows this very well, having been a wonderful leader in that committee. And it's a shame that the great chairman, Mike Gallagher, after assuming chairmanship, is going to no longer be in Congress. So we're glad that wonderful leaders like Lindsey Graham stay there, and we don't want them to ever leave. But it's a shame that great leaders like Chairman Gallagher, who sees the threat of China in Latin America, has chosen to leave Congress. But Carlos, I'm going to usurp Morgan's role.
Yeah.
Tell us about that committee that is a unifying committee that's brought Republicans and Democrats together, the only committee that's been able to do that.
I told you she's the grande dame of Miami.
Thank you, Grand Dame, for ceding some time. But the threat of China in our hemisphere is very real. And before I go there, I'll say one thing, that we are really going to miss Mike Gallagher. I think he's one of the most talented people in Congress, if not the most talented person that I've seen in Congress. And that China committee is really interesting in the fact that it is bipartisan. We're bipartisan, and we see the threat. We may not agree maybe on the solutions, but we do see the threat. So China in our hemisphere, and Senator, you're absolutely right. We need to start to pay attention to our neighbors. They're not our backyard, they're our neighbors. China and Russia are making incredible strides down in South America, Central America. Look, the Panama Canal, built by the United States. On both sides of the Panama Canal are ports controlled by Communist China. Down in Peru, they're building one of the largest ports in the Pacific, in South America, built by the Chinese. Who controls the electricity to Lima, Peru? It used to be two companies. Now it's two companies, both Chinese. So they're about to build another port in in Peru, and so they're going to go out for bids. Well, look, what's the big deal about the Chinese controlling the electricity? Well, hey, we'd like to have that contract, and if you don't, then we're going to raise the rates in Lima. And so they use all kinds of nefarious influence. They are buying influencers down in South America. They're buying politicians down in Central and South America as their footprint becomes more and more. And why is South America so important? Because of the natural resources. 30% of China's food actually comes from Latin America. Nope, see, you didn't know that, right? Okay. China can't feed itself. It absolutely needs South America. 70% of the lithium, copper, et cetera, that they use for the electrical grid they're trying to build, by the way, they're trying to sell us. They don't use it. They still burn coal to create electricity. They are by far the world's largest polluter, and yet they're selling us their stuff as we try to go clean while they pollute more and more and more. And so, yeah, China is a huge threat. They are not our friends. They want to become the world's dominant economic and military power by 2049. And frankly, we're helping them. It is our dollars that are being used by China to seed to plant the seeds of destruction of the United States and our way of life. Because the New World Order is China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to live in a world dominated by that New World Order. And so we have to do everything in our power, especially in our neighborhood, to be the beacon of freedom, be the steward of freedom and democracy in our hemisphere. And for way too long, we have ignored it. And the people of South America are suffering under totalitarian regimes because of the United States looking towards the east and towards the west and never looking in our own neighborhood. And so, you know, I guess I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Congressman. As always, very eloquent. We're going to get to everybody on the stage. Of course, I want you all to disagree with each other a little bit. Perhaps, maybe we'll get a debate going. Of course, we have to talk we have very lucky to have a head of state, former president of Bolivia with us. Sir, want to talk to you. You know, we have a few themes that have started to come together in this discussion. We talked about democracy versus autocracy. We've talked about the threat and the influence of the Chinese Communist Party in the region. I'm curious, during your presidency, how did you work with some of the international organizations like the IMF, the World Bank, OAS is represented here, and is there a role as we all try to continue to promote the rule of law and to promote transparency? What are the best practices in working with some of these international organizations?
Thank you, Morgan. Thank you, Julio, our host here at beautiful University of Miami, the home team of the South America 30 and over soccer championship team. Messi, Suarez, you got everybody. We'll be here for the America's World Cup, and a pleasure to be here with everybody, and Senator Graham, Representative Jimenez, and Juan Guaido's Fabiana. It's her birthday, right? If you see his voice a little raspy, he's been singing at the karaoke for her happy birthday to Fabiana. Yes, a big hand for her. How did I work? I worked fine, but I want to concentrate, Morgan, in time is of the essence. I feel tempted to talk about lithium. My country has 25% of the world's lithium. We can have a nice debate. It is not my fault. China refines between 63 to 93% of the cobalt, nickel, manganese, graphite, and lithium is the tennis balls that goes back and forth between their rackets. Until you change that, China is going to continue to be the #1 trade partner for South America because we have a lot of energy, we have a lot of food, we had a lot of minerals, and Luis Alberto Lacalle Pou, 4th-generation right-wingers in Uruguay, is queued up to sign a free trade agreement with China because the U.S. is not open for business and neither is Europe. Such is how the cookie crumbles. I want to concentrate on the issue that is the most important right now for South America. It's rule of the law or versus rule of the jungle. Security against criminality. Human rights against crimes against humanity. Democracy against autocracy. Freedom against tyranny. It all gets distilled and it comes down to one place. Sometimes in life, once in life, in one place, the direction of a hemisphere and the future of a country turns on what happens in a few weeks. And here we are. Kenny Loggins, this is it. Venezuela, write it down. This is what's going to happen in the next few weeks because everything will hinge on that. The Niners all are congregated in Venezuela. The Niners are Cuba 59, Iran 79, Putin 99, Chavez 99. They all converged and they're all in Venezuela and they gotten a hold of that country. And we're going to decide between who, what, and how. I'm going to run that through that very quickly. Who? Maduro. He's got a $15 million bounty on his head, courtesy of the DEA. He's got lawsuits against in The Hague for crimes against humanity documented by the United Nations with a long list that he has. And he has to choose between a cold cell in The Hague or a warm hammock in Havana. That's why he wants to stay in power. And on the other side, we have Machado. The ones of us that know her, and we praised Juan Guaido, Ledesma, Leopoldo Lopez, and now we're down to Machado. The last man standing is a woman. with the misty titanium smile, unbreakable, eloquent, intelligent. She's giving up everything. She's mothered by Zoom. 10 years she doesn't see her kids. She doesn't have a passport. She has to travel in a car because they don't sell her airplane tickets because she is a terrorist, according to the government. She's disbarred from running because she did not put her sworn statement, the lunch tickets, in the Congress in 2015. And this is Maduro doing that on her. I don't know about you, Juan, but I wouldn't take a lunch ticket from Maduro. You'd get Havana syndrome, I think, with him. And they don't let her run. And we have to decide right now what's going to happen. Senator Graham, in the next few weeks, we're going to decide if we lose Venezuela forever. And then we'll have the three tyrannies, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. Mr. Biden, I hate to say this under your watch, Nicaragua 2022 and Venezuela 2024, history is going to call you on it. We will call you on it because they are selling Venezuela down the river right now as we speak. The issue is, as a country, as a region, and as a global hotspot. As a country, what do you want from Venezuela? You want it to export oil and not people or drugs. Right now, they're exporting people to the border, 8 million people. They're exporting drugs, all the cocaine that's being re-exported. And it's not an reliable energy partner. With Maduro, you know, the short-term equations is, I want 100,000 barrels, the Chevron license, this. That is not the issue. You want 3 million barrels of oil a day, 8 million people coming back, and have Venezuela be a reliable supplier. Get Machado and the people of Venezuela to vote in a free election, and things will change. As a hemisphere, 9/11/2001, we signed a document. It'll be forever the second most relevant thing that happened that day. In Lima, Colin Powell was there. We said this region is democratic. We're not Asia. We're not Africa. We are all democratic. The exception was Cuba. Now it's Nicaragua. Now it's Venezuela. So if you want a hybrid neighborhood with dictatorships and democracy, let Maduro stay in power and get Machado gone. And have a global hotspot. Senator Graham, I appreciate what you said. Let me tell you something about Venezuela. It's occupied territory by the sheriff, not with an S, with a C and a double H. Cuba, Hezbollah, Hamas, ELN, Russia, Iran, FARC, Sheriff. They have occupied and dismembered the country. They did not fire a single missile. They're all there. You don't believe me? Google Lavrov, April 2023. Where does he go? Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua. Google Raisi, June 2023. Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua. They're the puppet regimes. ELN, FARC, they all live there. I didn't know Juan Krasnov. I had no idea who he was. Last Wednesday night, he was in Venezuela. Who is he? The Attorney General for Putin. What's he going to teach Venezuela? How to Navalny María Corina? I mean, what exactly is he going to do while he's there? Yeah, after killing Navalny. So this is the final, and I'll close with this. What is the U.S. role so important? The U.S. government got taken for a ride. In October, they signed a Barbados agreement. It said specifically, and Maduro signed it, the opposition gets to pick its candidate. Knowing this, Venezuelans came out in droves, and they come out time and again. Do not ask them to keep fighting. They bury their dead, they keep fighting. They visit their prisoners in jail, they keep fighting. They cry for their exiles, they keep fighting. They came out, 92% voted for Machado. I'm not sure that Biden is getting that much in the primaries on the Democratic side. They got 92% came out for Machado, knowing that the Barbados agreement said we could pick a candidate. Blinken said, expedite a reinstatement of the candidate, or we will snap back sanctions. I'll be very frank, Senator Graham, I was not expecting Amazon Prime, expedited 2-day delivery, but it's been 6 months, nothing happened, no snapback. Then the license was partially renewed, 45-day wind down. This is a soccer World Cup with a long overtime. And then you can give particular licenses to them. They know how the game is going to be played. And here we are, and look where we are, Morgan. I'll close with this. We're down to the fact that Machado cannot run. She put her country over her candidacy. She beats Maduro 4-1, 5-1, 6-1. She said, okay, Corina Lloris, an academic, 80-year-old, beautiful, wonderful woman. We try to register her. No, you cannot register her. Now we have a diplomat, Edmundo. Todo el mundo con Edmundo. We're talking about the substitute of the one that should have been running. Now, all we ask is let him run and let Machado be free on the streets to campaign so we can save Venezuela. And that requires Mr. Biden, Mr. Lula, Mr. Petro to just come out and say one thing. We're going to let Edmundo run, and we're going to let Machado be on the street to campaign to save Venezuela. That's all you have to do. We don't want you to help us. Just stop helping Maduro. And then Venezuelan people will take care of it. And if we get Edmundo on the ballot, and Machado is free and not jailed to be able to campaign, I guarantee you the Venezuelan people, July 28th, will be singing their national anthem loud and clear. Glory to the brave people who shook off the yoke. Do not help Maduro put the yoke down on the Venezuela people. Edmundo on the ballot, Machado campaigning, they will take care of democracy in Venezuela. Thank you.
Yeah. All the other politicians are getting nervous now. They're like, how do I beat that? Just kidding. That was amazing, Mr. President. I'm Jewish, but I wanted to say amen and hallelujah. Senator Graham wants to follow up.
Yeah, it was very, very impressive. We have limited time. I'm not the president, but I'm willing to help. What would you recommend I do and my colleagues do?
Can I say one thing quickly, Morgan? Yeah. Thank you, Senator Graham. We're here at the end of April. We had 2 sleepless nights with Juan, María Corina, talking. Edmundo is the candidate, and we're talking, right? María Corina is not on the field, right? She's going to be on the bench coaching and transferring the vote. So we're down to the substitute of the substitute. Just get him on the ballot. The party symbol is Mesa de Unidad Democrática, la Mesa de la Manito. Just keep that alive. He got registered. He's there. They can can him sometime next week. Just keep Edmundo, the name is Edmundo, González, on the ballot. And keep María Corina free. Her campaign slogan, Senator, is hasta el final, meaning to the end. It is not a figure of speech. She means it. When you do opposition in Venezuela, either exile is in your destiny, surrender. She's not going to go to exile. She's not going to surrender. So then you have left jail or cemetery. And when she says to the end, she means it. So just keep her alive, keep her free. Petro, Colombia, and Lula in Brazil asked Biden to give sanctions relief so we could register the candidate. And lo and behold, here we are. We didn't do it. And now we got to get Biden to simply say, we will only recognize elections as legitimate if Edmundo is on the ballot and Machado is campaigning. So if not, all the sanctions in the world. And I'll let you, one last little hint for you. It makes very uncomfortable, it's an uncomfortable discussion. Maduro is trying to use judges to disbar people from running. You can relate to what that means inside the U.S. system and why it would make some people uncomfortable to discuss that. But that's your issue here. That should not prevent you from acting in Venezuela, and it's between now and July 28th, where it's do or die.
Well, with your help and my friend in the House, why don't we do a sense of the Senate resolution urging the president to do exactly what you said.
Thank you.
And make the Senate vote on it.
Thank you.
Great. We are going to get to everybody around the table. I know that I'm here with a lot of my Latin American friends who like to talk, but we are getting to everybody. Juan Carlos Pinzon, former Colombian ambassador to the United States, Secretary of Defense. I know you want to talk about organized crime in Colombia and Latin America. Please do, but I think you also have to jump in this very lively discussion that we're having.
Well, first of all, thank you, Morgan. It's an honor to be here. Speaking after you, Mr. President, is, you know, an honor and very hard, even to match. All right, so thank you for your presence and your ideas. Well taken. Of course, we're here in a wonderful venue and surrounded by people that many of you, on different roles, different times, did great things, certainly for my country, for Colombia. So first of all, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your support. I want to thank you for your commitment. And I will tell you that we're going to need more help, not only for Colombia, which we're losing, but we're going to need help to all these problems in Latin America. By the way, Senator Graham, first of all, great to see you again. And I remember being mentored by Senator McCain, both in Halifax and in Munich Security Conference. And he always wanted not only me, but the region to be perceived. Now we have this America Summit, and I'm asking you here to somehow be our godfather of these kind of events, and make sure you come with bipartisan friends as well, and we create this big discussion on Latin America. Let me say something before getting into the issue I want to talk. It would be ideal if we were discussing on the power of Latin America. We're powerful, more than people think. You mentioned some of that. We have natural resources as nobody else. We have fresh water as nobody else. We have biodiversity as nobody else. We have 700 million people. And we have a bridge here in America that includes 62 million Latinos. Imagine if we decide to work together once and for all using the power of innovation, economics, capital, and education to the region, both sides. When we think about China or Russia and others, they don't have this. And we can have the single most powerful hemisphere in the planet. Sadly, we don't speak about that. And let me move to some of reality, because that's the goal. We got to move on to that. But today, Latin America is being taken slowly but steadily by organized crime. We are in the claws of organized crime. That's the reality of Latin America today. Let me just tell you that a thing that we had in Colombia, especially in the 90s, that somehow created the idea of Plan Colombia was the concept of narcocracy. Drug trafficking lords to cover power through financing politicians that got to power. And we thought we solved that. And we moved forward really far. Then we stopped. And for whatever the reason, we're moving backwards. But the bad news, the disease of Colombia has become a virus to the region. And this is happening from Mexico to Argentina. If you go and see the politics in Mexico, sad to say, but it's very worrisome. A lot of politicians are really just connected or defending the agenda of organized crime and justifying it, which is even worse. Don't talk about Honduras. Not even try Nicaragua. Colombia is a very special story that we have, a reality in which the country is just moving backwards. Let me just not even qualify that, but that's what's going on. Venezuela, Chile, Brazil, Argentina, Bolivia, your country. This is happening everywhere. But let me give you another insight on this. You can say that organized crime happens for two reasons: lack of rule of law or lack of social opportunity. And maybe it's true both. We have corruption as a disease in the region, and we have lack of inclusivity for more opportunity for more people that, they should have a play. But the bad news is that this has been weaponized. Weaponized by extreme parties that we thought were off the game after the end of Cold War. And these parties have somehow recovered, creating agendas that are just, again, using the rhetorical idea of equality and providing solutions. But the fact is that they have an objective: using democracy, as we saw in Venezuela, to raise to power, then change the rules of the game, and stay forever. And who's so happy with this? Sadly, we are at a different times in history. The past 30 years were somehow easy, as difficult as they probably were. We're now in the middle of, again, of a global power competition. And those regimes are watching Latin America. In other places, they have this war in Ukraine. We have these events in the Middle East that are very dramatic. And we have the challenges in the Asia Pacific that one day can become very difficult. So most of the eyes of the United States and of the world are in these areas. But the competition is happening here. They're taking country by country in this connection between politics, organized crime, and some push from abroad. That's what is going on. And we need to make sure that this narco-populism that is, consolidating to Latin America can be confronted. Now, some ideas. 1, 2, 3 ideas. The most important. I understand the United States needs to look to very difficult places because the world is becoming dangerous and complicated. The global order you will describe is being challenged and is being presented with a different thing. But, you know, the region needs attention and needs action. And being concessional, conceding to some of these countries, the case of Venezuela, because they have oil and maybe oil price will just pick up, was a big mistake. Or allowing, you know, people that has been part of crimes against humanity to be treated as regular citizens, as regular leaders. That's a mistake. So the other idea, no impunity. And if our systems cannot fight corruption or organized crime, maybe the US judges can, and they can provide indictments to multiple of these criminals. Those are some ideas, and certainly I'm probably speaking more for Uruguay from a country like Ecuador. You mentioned it. Doesn't make sense that they have to go to China to ask for a free trade agreement because the United States is not willing to talk. And we have there two leaders that are, one of them is fighting and putting his life in the line to confront organized crime in a way that has not been seen in Ecuador. And, you know, just support of, you know, good luck, you know, we're with you, we're sending some visitors, that's great. But this is about economics, social, and definitely security policies. And the thing in Uruguay is very clear on its democratic values. They don't have an agreement with the US. So they have to look for other places. Those are cases that we need to just think and discuss. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. You know, Roberta, I was just thinking of you and Juan Carlos Pinzon's, some of the things that he was talking about. And you work so much as in the whole conversation that we've had around democracy. You literally work on digital democracy and disinformation, information security. This is the biggest part of discussions, not just here, but around the world as it relates to elections. So what are you doing on that front, and how can we better have information security for our election process throughout Latin America?
Sure. Well, thank you so much. It's great to be here with everyone. At DDIA, we're essentially trying to understand and measure the impact of online harms on Latino communities. Until now, a lot of work has been done around this, mainly focused on content, narrative analysis, but essentially, as we know, anything that you look for on the internet, you're likely to find. And so we're trying to understand at what scale are those online harms actually impacting people's behaviors, not even just their beliefs, but the actual outcomes of those beliefs. And then how can we actually then experiment with addressing some of the core issues that I know Ambassador Pinzon mentioned, but in our case, the psychological, social, media consumption drivers of why people engage with what they do on the internet. One of the biggest things that we're looking at, and disinformation is kind of a hot topic, as you all know, in Washington right now. One of the things that we're looking at is who are the people that actually see and believe disinformation? What characteristics do they have in common? What do they share? Where are they consuming their information? And what we're trying to do really is get beyond is this a conversation between fact-checking or inoculation and pre-bunking? Because really all of the solutions apply and they've all been shown to work effectively. We just don't know enough about the different groups of people that are at the different levels of the spectrum of belief. And so a person, and we've done some polling around this, a person that believes 1 in 16 false narratives may need a fact check. A person that believes 12 of the 16 does not need a fact check. That won't work on them. They might need some depolarization exercises. Maybe they need to meet some people from the other side of the aisle every once in a while, get out of their WhatsApp groups with family and friends where they have to kind of verify information in real time. Our research has also shown, and we did this polling, we have some polling in the field right now. We did polling in 2022 just of Latino adults in the US. And what we found was that despite the headlines, the majority of people are not seeing or believing disinformation on the internet. And when they do, they're very, very highly skeptical of it. So the majority of people are definitely not gullible, they're not stupid. They just don't know what to believe in this like very polluted environment in which we're navigating on the internet. The people, interestingly enough, and I would love to replicate this in our data, we'll know soon, but the people who were seeing higher levels of disinformation and believing higher levels of disinformation were not low education, low access to information voters. They actually tended to be, and this doesn't seem that surprising to me, they tended to be the people that had really high levels of political interest and political engagement. They showed conspiratorial tendencies, and they tended to consume very hyper-partisan media and information. And so we're also looking at places like YouTube, where 47% of Latinos in the US are there for news and information on a typical week. They're consuming what we would call infotainment, information entertainment. They trust the influencers, the infotainers, the shows. They're maybe watching 4 channels, and that's all that they watch for news and information. And so we're really working to understand then what can we do in investing in those very psychological and social solutions, and how can we then help political campaigns, political actors, institutions, election administrators better communicate very proactively.
That's to say nothing of AI and the influence that it's going to have in the political process. I'm frightened of this.
There are at least 3 people in the room I know you should talk to about it.
Roberta, did you say it was 47% of people in Latin America get their news from YouTube?
No, 47% of Latinos in the United States.
In the United States.
Mhm.
Oh.
On a typical week, they're using YouTube as a primary channel for news and information.
Well, I have a YouTube channel, Morgan Ortegas, that you all can follow. Never any disinformation. I want to get you guests on in this discussion. Also, I want to pick up on something that Ambassador Juan Carlos Pinzón said that I wrote down. And you're, of course, at the Organization of American States, and I think this is applicable to you because you're covering transnational crime. But he said Latin America is being slowly taken by organized crime. I'm curious if you agree with the ambassador's statement, and if so, is the United States and are your member states doing enough to work together to combat that?
Thank you, Morgan, for the question and the comment from Ambassador Pinzón. I agree in the sense that it's important to understand that when we talk about organized crime, we are not talking only about a question or an issue of security. I mean, we should remember that when we talk about organized crime, we are talking about violence, we are talking about corruption, we are talking about illicit economies, and much more complex, not only illicit economies or illegal activities. Organized crime also involve legal activities, because we are leading with organizations that among their portfolio they include and they start to invest money and capitals in legal activities also. So the challenges are much more complex. But the point on which I wanted to back or to jump is something that Juan Guaidó mentioned at the beginning regarding an issue that is illegal mining. And why I would like to share some comments on illegal mining, because it's completely in line and in connection with a lot of comments on the table, in the sense that illegal mining, we are not talking about, again, just an illegal activity. We are talking about the human trafficking. We are talking about the potential abuse of human rights. We are talking about environmental crimes. We are talking about the same organizations that are involved in drug trafficking. So from the OAS, from the Organization of American States, we have a regional project working against illegal mining, very close with authorities from Colombia, Ecuador, Guyana, Suriname, Peru. Obviously, we are very worried about the situation in Venezuela, in particular with Orinoco. So we have been working, for example, identifying particular typologies of money laundering associated with illegal mining. We have identified at least 16 typologies in this sense, together with more than 130 red flags associated with this activity. So, and in particular, I would like to share with you regarding China, and this is public, that's why I can share this with you. We have been working very close with Ecuador authorities, and we have identified a big contrast between the declaration of exportation of gold from Ecuador to China in contrast to the declaration of imports of gold from China. So this has been something very important and useful to promote the public discussion about what is doing China with their investment, what about the regulation, what about how many controls they are really respecting, what about we are talking about the natural resource from Ecuador. So it's important to talk about the external actors across our Americas and with particular issues such as illegal mining. So just to close my comments, I would suggest don't forget that when we talk about organized crime, it's not just a question of police forces, it's not just a question of security agenda. At the end of the day, it's a question of the institutions, democracy, the respect of the law, and all the highly potential of corruption among all our institutions, all the sector of security, justice, and the political system themselves. So that's why organized crime is indeed a priority for the region and should be considered in this sense. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gaston. We have two more people to get to for their first time to speak, and then we're going to hopefully have time to have Congresswoman Ross Layton and Senator Graham do a closing for us of their thoughts. I'm going to go quickly to Manuel Castro, who's a commissioner in the mayor's office in New York City. He's the commissioner of immigrant affairs. You have a wonderful life story, which I think would be great for you to share with everyone that leads to your role. But you know, you're the mayor and your office, you've been in the headlines a lot for the past 6 months, and you clearly have had many challenges in New York City. I want you to sort of separate fact from fiction for us, and how is New York City handling what the mayor has termed an immigrant crisis? How do you balance the influx with the need to take care of immigrants, especially in a city like New York that's built on immigrants?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm Manuel Castro, and I want to thank Concordia for inviting me to participate in this distinguished panel. I do have to say and share my story. I myself am an immigrant. I crossed the border with my mother when I was 5 years old, and I grew up undocumented in New York City. I grew up a dreamer. And because of the opportunities afforded to me, I am now serving as commissioner in New York City, a city that is certainly thriving, a city that is still the largest and safest city, the largest, safest city in the country, and home to 3.2 million immigrants. And we're very proud of that. And we continue to receive asylum seekers in our city over the last 18 months, approximately 200,000 asylum seekers from primarily Venezuela and other parts of Latin America, but from really all over the world. And as the mayor mentioned earlier today, our advocacy and our biggest challenge in New York is the lack of expedited work authorization. That is what we have been advocating for. It would be a game changer for us, for asylum seekers to be able to work as soon as they arrive. As a result of not being able to work, we've had to open about 218 shelters across New York City to provide shelter and other services to asylum seekers. But as the mayor mentioned earlier today, every time we visit with them, we talk to them, they tell us they don't want anything from us. They just want to have the ability to work. They want to have the ability to contribute to our city, to our country, and yes, send money back home in the hopes that their family members don't have to migrate, in the hopes that their lives can improve and they can support their communities back home. But I do want to address some of the issues that came up here today. In fact, a lot of this is being driven by misinformation on social media, as was pointed out earlier. The mayor and I visited Latin America. We went to Colombia, Ecuador. We traveled through Mexico. We visited the border. And a common theme is misinformation. Misinformation by the criminal organizations that are now the drivers of human smuggling. They've created an additional revenue source in this human smuggling. And they're using this as marketing schemes, of course, never telling the actual risks involved in migrating through the Darien Gap, what's actually on the other side once they arrive in the country, and also social media personalities who've monetized misinformation, who are actually making money off of ad revenue by spreading misinformation. Those two have been key drivers of migration. But what is, I think, most consequential is the misinformation about immigrants that has increased anti-immigration sentiment, intolerance through Latin America, but certainly here in the United States, which is getting in the way of sensible, common sense policy making in our country. Again, you know, this is this type of trafficking and misinformation of immigrants is probably the most hurtful because it impacts many of us, regardless of our immigration status. It is often anti-Latino hatred that is produced as a result of this misinformation that is spread across the board. I just want to thank former President Duque, who I met with earlier today. I think he showed a lot of courage in regularizing the million Venezuelans that migrated to their country despite opposition, and we've shown positive results as a result of this action. So thank you to former President, and thank you to all of you who continue to advocate for immigrant communities.
Do you have a quick follow-up?
Yeah, just a brief comment. First, would be great if Manuel would be in his own country of origin, working hard as he is for New York now. But my point is, if we were to have prosperity and security in Latin America, instead of organized crime taking, we will have a lot less migrants. The reason why millions of people are coming from Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Honduras, Haiti, Cuba, is because, you know, they don't have a chance to live there. You know, there are governments that are going after them. There are governments that are not designing policies to create prosperity and economic future, and in consequence, people doesn't have a future, so they come to America. And of course, now my point as a Latin American, you know, the great majority, I would say 99% of those Latin Americans are coming here to work, to be good citizens, and are family people. So they want to be good people here. And that's the other part of the story. But if we want to hold migration, let's make sure we save the region from the problems that we're discussing today, including organized crime.
Dr. Chavez, did you have a quick follow-up?
No, I just wanted to add to that. And I know early on, Senator Graham mentioned the pull factors. I think we need to pay just as much attention to the push factors, and because the only way to address these migration, for example, is to address the underlying causes, including security, including lack of opportunity, and including authoritarianism that are driving people to the United States.
And
Mr.
Dr.
Castro?
Chavez,
Yeah,
yes. And actually, really, to your point, it's important to understand that one of the biggest drivers of criminality is the illegal trafficking of guns to Latin America, which fuels criminality and fuels migration to the north. I speak with asylum seekers often that point that fear of violence, criminality as a result of gun violence in their communities is why they decide to migrate and on our end apply for asylum seeking asylum as a result.
Last response here will be
just one line
Congressman?
to put one thing. As migration happening, criminals are taking advantage of that as well. And Tren de Aragua has come to the U.S. and has come to New York. And that's the other point. You know, if we don't go after them, those people are going to affect the credibility of the rest of Latin American people that is coming for work. So we need to be very strong against those bands coming to threat American citizens as well.
Congressman?
Two things. Number one, because of our border policy, we have allowed these criminal organizations to make billions of dollars. Before the Biden administration, the criminal organizations were making about $500 million a year on human trafficking. Now they're making over $1 billion a month on human trafficking. So before we can even talk about immigration reform, you have to control the border. And the reason everybody's coming is because they can get in. All right? If they couldn't get in, you wouldn't have so many people. So let's go back to what's the causes of it. And maybe I can wrap it all together with China and put everything all in a nice little bow, okay? So we have been ignoring Latin America. If we want to do a lot of things that actually works in our strategic interests is, one, incentivize onshoring of those industries that are now overseas and nearshoring. and when I say nearshoring, is that those jobs that are currently in China or somewhere else in the Far East could be done right here in the United States or in Central and South America. And if you do that, and if we actually do that, then we improve the conditions in those countries so the people, the folks won't want to immigrate. Because you know what? Nobody wants to leave their home country. They love their country, you know? I'm here because my parents brought me here. They love Cuba, but they were forced out by a communist regime because they'd rather give me freedom and live in freedom versus living in the country which they loved and which they wanted to return to but never could. And so if you really want to kind of put things together, again, let's incentivize investment in the United States and in Latin America. Let's bring those industries back. Let's quit shipping our money over to China and those countries that are wanting to hurt us and give it to the people that actually need help, which is right here in our own hemisphere. And so, you know, that will work wonders for our security and also for an immigration policy that kind of makes sense. Because again, one thing, this is political fact. We can't talk about immigration reform until we secure the border. And until we have a president that wants to secure the border, we can't talk about immigration reform.
Well, we are very lucky to have the president of the University of Miami with us. He's also a Concordia Leadership Council member. That's our senior organization within Concordia. And listen, you're starting to hear, really, these are the debates that are happening in American society and Latin American society. I mean, they're all happening right here at this table. Thank you to Matthew Swift, of course, for putting this together. But I thought you would be well poised to take these big, meaty, and weighty issues that are the most important national security issues that we're discussing today. You know, Roberta was talking about disinformation and democracy. We talked about China. We've had a robust debate about immigration and the root causes from some of the countries. So if you can give us a sense of how important is not only Miami, the city of Miami, but especially the University of Miami, how important is it in all of these debates that we've had today? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And again, welcome to everyone. We're really honored to host you. You know, there's a very impressive sense of urgency around this table. I think President Quiroga said it, but whether it's the threats to democracy or the advance of organized crime, the advance of poverty, there's a sense of urgency. I think Juan Guaido can attest to that personally. Everyone here has a sense of urgency. As someone from Latin America, from Mexico, I share that. So I do hope that we will come with enlightened policies, and this is something that universities actually do. We study, we frame issues, we provide information, we try to enlighten policy through the work we do. But the other thing we do is that we naturally are oriented towards the future. Most political leaders in Latin America, and in fact in the world, go to a university. And I don't know if you've realized this, but the age at which most people go to university is exactly the same age at which they become citizens of their respective countries, around 18 years of age. You start university, you become a citizen. That is an amazing opportunity to think in the context of the urgency of what are the longer-term solutions as we look to the next generations. And I think we have a huge opportunity, and I know we're out of time, so I'm just going to say two ideas. First, we need to bring back into the university space, in our educational mission, the transmission of fundamental values of democracy, including freedom of expression, including developing the ability to disagree respectfully and not suppress or cancel people who have different opinions, and including the ability to understand and appreciate different mindsets and perspectives. Diversity is a huge value. It includes diversity of perspective and a diversity of thought. And it is up to us as educators to make sure not just that we lecture about that, but that we actually develop practices in our own internal way we conduct our business that put those values in front of us. We also need to promote the values of democracy. This is where citizens who've just become students can develop that appreciation of how much is to be lost. Second idea is to look externally. This is a blessed hemisphere with with resources and talent, but cursed with all the problems that we have been hearing about. One solution is actually to try to bring students together. If we bring people from different contexts together at that critical age when they become both citizens and students, through student mobility, through shared opportunities, I think we will find elements for a more peaceful world. This was the key and the rationale for the Erasmus project in Europe. Coming out of World War II, countries that had been for millennia fighting each other, suddenly use student mobility as a way to redevelop a shared sense of purpose and mission. I think we need an Erasmus for the Americas. And Senator Graham, when you spoke about that bill to try to integrate, I hope we bring back the idea of supporting student mobility. Not just to attract talent, which we do have a lot of foreign students who then stay here and drive a lot of the innovations, but for people to go back and live the idea of a democratic future. Our business is in the future, it's in building bridges to future generations, and I think taking people at that critical age and instilling the values of democracy and finding how much more we have in common than we have that is different, I think that's where probably we will find not the urgent solutions of today, but the sustainable solutions of the future.
I think what you just said is so important, and it's, yes, please. And it's so especially important that you are impressing these values upon your university when we could all leave here and go turn on the television or look on our phone and see what happens in universities whenever they don't espouse the values that you just discussed. And you know, for anybody in the room who's Jewish, we're going into Passover tonight. And the best thing that, to end on this, I'll let Senator Graham wrap it up. The best thing that you could do for us is what you just said, is to promote the different mindsets, perspectives, and thoughts so that nobody in this country feels unsafe on university campuses like they do today. Also, Congresswoman, did you want to wrap up anything too?
I just wanted to say, I love this hopeful, optimistic message of Dr. Frank. I believe in the greatness of America. I believe in the promise of our nation. I believe that we are that shining city on the hill. And I believe, I'm a Ronald Reagan Republican. I don't know when he became a rhino, but but he's not in my book, and I want to get rid of this disrespect for institutions that we have right now. Gaston spoke about it. People feel like there's no election integrity. We have media bias, we have confirmation bias, and I am hopeful that we can build those bridges that Dr. Frank talked about. And I hope that Lindsey Graham develops this, maybe the Munich Security Conference for the Americas. That's what we need.
Yeah.
That's what we need.
That's right. We'll
Lindsey.
Well, I hate to end on a negative note, but we are. I have listened intently. You go from the lowest illegal immigration to the highest illegal immigration, not because things have changed in the region, it's the pull factors. If you can't identify the problem, you will never solve it. I've been in the Gang of Eight. I'm Lindsey Gomez on talk radio. I've had the crap beat out of me for trying to solve immigration since John McCain, Ted Kennedy, the Gang of Eight, you name it, I've done it. This letting the border collapse has destroyed illegal immigration reform maybe for a generation. So that's the consequences of having the border broken. You've destroyed the ability to fix this problem for a generation if we don't first secure the border. Eloquent. Why would you expect Maduro to agree to his own demise? Who would ever think that the dictator would have an election where he could lose? Whose idea was it if you behave well and you have an election where you lose and go to jail? That's ridiculous. First, you got to know who you're dealing with, all right? I want to push Venezuela to be better, but you got to stay on this guy's neck. To expect him to have an election where he loses without tremendous pushback from us is silly and stupid. Now, as to the Munich Security Conference, Singapore Security Conference, they work for the regions. We need one for this part of the world, and I want it to be in Miami, and I want it to start this year.
Well, and that's why we are at the Concordia Summit, the new Munich Security Conference. Okay, I'm going to get in trouble if I don't have you guys vote. So I think I'm doing this right. Question 1, which stakeholder group do you believe has the greatest responsibility for fostering a rule of law that harmonizes national security and human rights in Latin America? Okay, everybody see? Government authorities, civil society organizations, legal and judicial institutions, international organizations, and private sector entities. Everybody have a chance to vote? Yeah? Okay, I'm going to go to number 2 because I'm over time. You know, normally on television, I have a producer in my ear telling me to rap. No one's here doing that, so I'm just going to keep talking. Okay, question number 2. How do you perceive the role of international cooperation in addressing transnational security threats such as drug trafficking and organized crime in Latin America? Everybody got it? I'll give you a second to vote. You all look intently like you're actually doing it. It's impressive. Okay, final one. Considering recent advancements in technology and AI, how optimistic are you about their potential to enhance security while protecting human rights in Latin America? We need a button for, we'll do whatever Roberta Braga tells us to do. Okay, I'll let you all keep voting. Listen, this has been an amazing conversation. I hope this was recorded because I want to go back and listen to it again. It needs to be broadcast. We'll see. If Lindsey Graham had anything to do with it, this was recorded. Listen, for safety reasons, we do ask all of the panelists, we're going to exit the stage. We do have the final panel today. We have Senator Dodd coming in. So if you can remain seated, we are going to conclude this panel. And panelists, if you can exit with me off stage, and then we will have the final conference for today. Thank you so much for letting me be your moderator. I hope you enjoyed this panel.